The year is 1993. There is a man named Dr. Paul Rosenberg who works at the University of Harvard Medical Center, which I think is a medical center for children. He is given the task of giving personal reviews to all of his staff. One of his staff members' name is Amy Bishop. Amy Bishop is the postdoctoral research fellow for Dr. Paul Rosenberg. Dr. Paul Rosenberg gets to her review, rips her to absolute shreds. He has nothing nice to say about her. She never does anything correctly. Her research is poor, her punctuality is terrible, and he has absolutely nothing nice to say about her. He submits his review, and a little while later, Amy resigns. Now, we all know that sometimes when you work in a big position at a university, you are given the option, or at any company really, you are given the option to resign rather than being fired. They'll come to you and be like, hey, this is what's about to happen. We want you to be able to walk away with your dignity. We'll offer you a severance package, but you have to resign and you have to do it now. I'm not saying that's what happened, but we all know that that's possible. She got a bad review. She resigned shortly thereafter. If I were to connect those dots, I would say that that's what happened. 2 weeks after she resigns, Paul Rosenberg gets a package at his door, the door where he lives, his home door, not his office door, the door of his home residence. He opens the package, and inside are 2 pipe bombs. Now, whoever made these pipe bombs did a poor job. They're bad at math, or they're bad at science, or they're just bad at making pipe bombs because they didn't go off. They were, what's the word for when something doesn't work? Duds, that's a good word, thank you. All Paul Rosenberg has is a box with 2 pipe bombs in it, no return address. There's no evidence on the box. Keep in mind that this is 1993. There's not enough evidence on the box to discern where it came from. No one has any clue, except Paul remembers that he wrote this terrible review for one of his postdoctoral research fellows. And he says, maybe you guys should question Amy Bishop. So they do. The police go and they question Amy Bishop, and she is pissed. How dare you assume that I would try to kill someone based on a review? We didn't even have any type of relationship for me to want to do that. If he doesn't think that I'm a good research fellow, that's fine. That's not a reason for me to want to kill him. And her husband agrees. My wife would never. She's a good person. She would never do anything like that. Do you have any evidence? How dare you even show up on my doorstep? And so the police left, and no charges were filed on Amy Bishop. And there's, to this day, no serious clue or no real evidence on who sent the pipe bombs. Now, I'm no detective, but I feel like I could connect those dots. One's in the chat if you think you know who sent the pipe bombs, but all of that is alleged because, again, no charges were ever filed. And that could be the end of the story, but it's not, because there's another incident involving Amy Bishop in 2002. After the 1993 incident, life for Amy Bishop goes basically, as life would go for a normal person until 2002. In 2002, Amy walks into an IHOP, no reservation because it's an IHOP and you don't need reservations there. She's with her family, her kids and her husband. And she walks up to the host and says, hey, we need a booster seat. And the host says, I'm so sorry. We just gave out our last booster seat, but when a table leaves that is using one, we'll bring one right over to you. Amy then takes that moment to scan the room, and she finds a table with a family at it that has a booster seat. She walks over to this table and, like, any other perfectly normal person, she says, "Give me the effing booster seat." The person at the table, whose name we now know is Rachel, I think. It's either Rachel or Michelle. I didn't write that part down in my notes. I'm so sorry to her. But the person at the table, we're going to call her Michelle, says, "No, I'm not going to give you this booster seat. My child is sitting in it and we're still eating." So Amy, again, like any other normal person in the world, grabs a fistful of Michelle's hair and starts punching her, saying, "Give me the seat. I'm Amy Bishop. I'm Dr. Amy Bishop," beating her face in because she wants this booster seat. Perfectly normal. The restaurant breaks it up and naturally asks Amy to leave. The police are called, and depending on where you get your information, either charges were filed and she was given probation and anger management for this incident, or no charges were filed at all. It varies depending on where you look. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't feel like that punishment fit that crime, even a little bit. Rachel was minding her business with her family. I don't know if her name is Rachel or Michelle, but she was minding her business with her family, and now she has had her face beaten over a booster seat. And this woman over here gets maybe probation and anger management. And as I was doing research for this, one of the places that I got this information said that her husband confirmed that she never actually attended the anger management classes. So now here we have Amy Bishop, who in 1993 allegedly sent 2 pipe bombs to her ex-supervisor for giving her a bad review and causing her to have to resign from her job. And then 9 years later, beats up a woman at your local IHOP for having the last booster seat. And that could be where the story ends, but it's not. Because there's another incident way back in 1986 when Amy was just 21 years old that actually resulted in someone dying. So far in the story, Amy has assaulted a lady in an IHOP and allegedly sent 2 pipe bombs to her former supervisor's doorstep. Allegedly. It was never proven. What was proven was that in 1996, when Amy was 21 years old, she was at her childhood home. Her parents, I'm not sure if her parents were there. They definitely weren't in the room. But who was in the room was her little brother. Her little brother was amazing at school, okay? He was one of those kids that's like, you don't even have to try really hard to be good at school. You just, show up and everything's fine. You just show up to math class and then on your report card, it's an A+. You just show up to gym, and even though you don't know how to run properly and you've never played basketball before in your life, on the report card, A+. He was one of those kids. And Amy, though she's 21 now and she's no longer in high school, she doesn't really have to worry about those types of grades. She is struggling just a little bit in college. And I guess you could say she's jealous. So in this room, in her childhood home, where her parents and her little brother live, and she lives also, maybe, I'm not sure. She is in this room with her little brother, who is terrified because he is staring down the barrel of a shotgun being held by his big sister, Amy. And this poor little boy took a deep breath, and it was his last. Shot and killed by his sister in a room in his parents' house. Once their parents realized what happened, they called the police. The police show up. Sorry, I'm turning the pages on my notes. The police show up. They ask questions. They gather information and determine that Amy shooting and killing her little brother with a shotgun was an accident, and no charges are filed. She's returned to her parents, where she continues to live, continues to go to school, and eventually graduates with a degree from Harvard University. And that could be the end of the story. But it's not. So far in the story, Amy has assaulted a woman in an IHOP over a booster seat. As a result, she was either not charged or given probation and anger management. It varies on who you ask. But if you do ask her husband, he said that she never took any anger management classes. She allegedly sent 2 pipe bombs to her previous supervisor, who gave her a bad review, and which resulted in her resigning from her job at the Harvard University Children's Hospital. And when she was younger, before any of that happened, she shot and killed her little brother with a shotgun in her mother's house. But we actually didn't know any of that until this next incident happened. One's in the chat if you went to college. It's okay if you didn't. College isn't for everybody. I went to college though. And I had professors I didn't like. I had professors I did like. But what I liked about these professors is knowing that I held a little power over them, because there was a website called Rate My Professor. Now, if you're not familiar with Rate My Professor, college students go on this website and can rate on a scale of, I think it's 1 to 5, how their professor was. They can also leave a little blurb, a little review. So if you go through Amy's college reviews, her Rate My Professor reviews, there are a couple really good ones. Oh, she's brilliant. She's a great professor. Her class was super easy. I loved it. But there are a lot more that say something along the lines of, she doesn't teach. She just reads from the textbook. There's no point in even going to class. She doesn't put on the exam what she says she'll put on the exam. So if you study for the exam, you'll fail. A lot of her reviews were negative. At this time, she was currently a professor at the University of Huntsville in Alabama. And is it Alabama? I think that's right. It was the University of Huntsville for sure. And after these reviews came in the year 2010, this was at the end of fall semester, so right before spring semester started, she was denied tenure. If you don't know what that means, it means when you're a professor, if you're denied tenure, generally it means your contract ends at the end of the next semester. So for her, that meant that she was going to teach the rest of spring semester, and then she would have to find a different job. She took in that information. It is what it is. Along with her Rate My Professor comments, there were a lot of whispers around the campus about her being erratic, about her not being able to control her anger, and about just weird and sometimes violent and unnecessary tendencies that she showed. On February 12th, 2010, there was a faculty meeting. This was like a regular thing that happened, and there were, I think, 12 or 13 people involved in this meeting, Amy included. Of these 12 or 13 people, however, Amy is the only one who was denied tenure. So she is the only professor that will not be returning after this semester present at this faculty meeting. The faculty meeting goes on as, a usual faculty meeting would go on for about 30, 40 minutes, at which point Amy silently stands up, pulls a handgun out of her bag, and starts shooting. Now, she doesn't just start spraying the room. That's erratic. That's, unprovoked wildness. She very ceremoniously turns to the person to her right and shoots her, execution style, in the head, and then continues walking around the table, shooting everyone in their seat as she goes. Now, one person sitting at this table is smart, okay? She sees the gun come out and she hits the deck, okay? Because that's what you do when you see a gun. You hit the floor. And she did. She hit the floor as Amy's walking around the table shooting everyone, and starts watching her feet. As her feet move around this table, she thinks to herself, I have to do something. So she lunges towards this woman's feet as she's walking around the table, shooting everyone in the head, and grabs her. Amy's startled. She was not expecting this, but she's smart. So she shakes the woman off, kicks her to the side, stands over top of her, and points the gun directly in her face. Now this woman is laying on the floor, a gun pointed in her face. What can she do but just start talking? Amy, you know my kids. You've met my kids. I've been to your house. I've met your kids. I've helped you with work things. Anytime you needed help, I helped you. Please don't do this. My kids need me. Amy pulls the trigger, but the gun jams. She pulls it again, nothing. We're not sure if she ran out of bullets or if the gun sincerely was just jammed, but everybody else in the room sees this as their moment. They push Amy out of the room and barricade the door with all of the furniture they can find. At this point, Amy walks to the bathroom. She grabs a tissue, wipes her forehead, picks up her phone, calls her husband, and says, "Hey babe, what's for dinner tonight?" She's still there in the bathroom, easily found when the cops show up. They take her into questioning, and the only thing she says is, "No, that's not what happened. Nobody died. What are you talking about?" As if it was some sort of fever dream, some sort of hallucination that everyone else was experiencing except her. Three people died that day. Multiple other people were injured. And none of the other stories that I told you before this point had ever come out until she was on trial for these murders. She didn't really plead guilty to this. She copped to a plea. She took a plea deal. But the plea deal, the murders in this deal were so stacked that she basically ended up with life in prison. Once she was on trial for this incident, all of the other stories came out. The story about her assaulting that woman in the IHOP, the story about her allegedly sending a pipe bomb to her previous supervisor, and the story about her killing her little brother in cold blood in their mother's living room. To this day, to this very day, she is submitting appeals to try and get out of jail. She thinks that when her parole comes up, that she's going to get out. She has been working tirelessly since the day she was sentenced to get out. But I don't think she's ever going to get out. Because this is wild, okay? You killed 3 people, you injured multiple others, you killed your little brother, you sent pipe bombs to your supervisor, you assaulted a woman in an IHOP for a booster seat. And now you're sitting in a jail cell thinking to yourself, yeah, I'm gonna get out next time. What? And that's the story of Amy Bishop. She was who she was. She was never gonna take any shit from anybody because she was Dr. Amy fucking Bishop.